All right. Well, you know what, folks? What a treat. What a treat. In this episode of Supernatural Japan, I have someone who knows a lot of spooky stories and tells them very well. And he's gonna share one with us a little bit later. In this week's episode of Supernatural Japan, I am very fortunate to have with me Peter Laws. Peter, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Kevin, I'm honored. Thank you for having me on Supernatural Japan. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm absolutely excited too. And you know what? It's I've been watching your channel for some time, and it didn't click until recently when I watched one of your videos where you told a very scary story from Kyoto. I said, wait a second, there's a great connection. Let's see if I can get Peter on the podcast. And here you are, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and you invite me on at an opportune time because I'm right in the thick of having a kind of Junji Ito binge where I'm just reading through all of those like old scary mangas, and just really struck with how I feel a bit sorry for people who don't sort of venture out of their classic kind of country of paranormal origin, because they're missing out on some really freaky and creepy ideas. And even just little things like I write novels as well as do nonfiction, and I sit there and try and think of things that are scary, and then I read like Tomi or Uzumaki and all these other things where there's people having like tiny hairs coming out of their faces and stuff, and like fish with legs and all these things that didn't occur to me. And so I'm always encouraged to hear about podcasts and YouTube channels that are exploring the scary stuff that is beyond their doorstep, because it's kind of a different level of scary. There's a freshness to it.
Oh, absolutely.
And I find that fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm from Canada, as you can maybe tell by the accent, or North America anyway.
Yeah.
You can tell. But I mean, I grew up steeped in Irish and Scottish folklore growing up on the east coast of Canada.
Yeah.
And that's where I got my interest in things. But now this is my 24th year living in Asia, actually. And
right.
yeah. My wife is Japanese. I spent more than 10 years living in Japan, and I lived in South Korea. I've lived in China, Malaysia, and all of these places have such incredible and terrifying folklore to some extent, if you look at it.
Yes, absolutely. What I find really interesting as well is that some people who do get so kind of blinkered into their own culture, they will find things about another culture scary that isn't even scary. I like, it's technically not scary, but it's because it's different. Like I always remember when I first saw The Exorcist, but it's when I was a pretty young teenager. And it starts with the Islamic kind of call to prayer, but because I'd never heard that before, I just thought, oh, is this some sort of like a demonic chant?
Yeah.
And of course it wasn't. It's a perfectly legitimate religious idea. But because I didn't know what it was, because it felt different, even something which was completely fine and holy, as it were, became scary. So there's always a lot of potential in discovering the creepy and the freaky if you're just willing to hop on a plane, whether it's figuratively or physically.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what? This is awesome. I love talking about this, and just for the listeners out there who might not be familiar with who you are, before we get further into the spooky,
Sure.
and the creepy and the freaky, could you tell the listeners of Supernatural Japan just a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, well, I guess these days particularly known for my YouTube show, which is called Into the Fog with Peter Laws, which tells scary stories of the paranormal, and it does so in a way that tries to be sympathetic towards the people who've experienced these things, particularly because I get so many personal emails from people who have experienced these paranormal things in their house or whatever, and it's really traumatic. And so I don't, it's not like a debunking channel, although occasionally I'll make sure there's balance and say, well, look, it could have possibly been this rational explanation, but it does err on the side of empathy for witnesses and spending time trying to understand what it's like for them to go through this. Because I do think people brush over that sort of thing, and sometimes people who watched Into the Fog say they like the detail of it, because I I might talk about a witness who says they were in a house and maybe a side table moved 5 inches or something, and I'm like, well, wait, how far is that? And so I'll get my measuring tape out and actually move his sideboard out and then measure it and show it on camera and say, actually, that is really freaky to see that move.
Yeah.
And so to spend time, uh, even if you don't believe in this stuff, people go through these things, and it's genuinely traumatic. So Into the Fog, like, tells the scary experiences of people, but takes time to bed it into their fear and the trauma of it, and thankfully it seems to be going well. It's turned out to be very successful. It's become like my full-time job now, which is really amazing. But it's also frightening. I think it's
A different kind of frightening.
yeah. But I think people appreciate that it's the empathy side, but also when you spend time in the shoes of another person in that situation, you start to think, wait a minute. It's all well and good to say, oh, these people were lying. They made it up for a book deal or something. I'm getting emails from people who are going through stuff and telling me, don't tell anyone about this. I just need to get it off my chest, but don't talk about it. It's just for you. So this sort of stuff is happening. So Into the Fog does that. But I do, I was, before that, I was an author. And I mean, I technically never stopped being an author, I suppose, because, probably write another book at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, novelist of 4 different supernatural kind of thrillers, but maybe more like crime fiction thrillers.
Okay.
And also a book that I wrote on a nonfiction book on why it's okay to be drawn to the morbid and macabre. That book was called The Frighteners.
Okay, yeah.
Why we love monsters, ghosts, death, and gore.
Oh.
So that's the sort of stuff I do. Although people find it a bit odd because I also used to be a church minister, a Christian church minister, and that can kind of confuse people a little bit because, why would someone who is supposed to be, into good, nice things be so alive when it comes to the darkness? But that's just who I am.
Yeah. I understand. Absolutely. I mean, I'm someone who is absolutely I'm tickled pink with Tales of the Dark, and I mean, for me, the folklore. I mean, I think where I mentioned earlier on that I became fascinated with folklore, kind of Irish and Scottish folklore, and superstitious, the more superstitious of life side of life where I grew up, and I just. Reading tales of Finn McCool and giants and, fairies and these kind of things. I thought that was really interesting. And I suppose a lot of it wasn't dark, but I thought it was very fascinating. And I think moving forward for me now, being in Asia for so long and just seeing all these like different aspects of folklore and the kind of dark history, I don't know, just something about it draws me to it. I suppose you understand that.
Yeah.
There is a draw.
It's
now,
a very human.
Yeah.
It's very human emotion and an absolutely healthy one. But I do have that kind of, maybe it's from when I used to work as a church pastor, perhaps, but I do have that kind of pastoral feeling of going to people who like these scary things and almost like a hand on the shoulder to say, look, people might make you think that there's something wrong with you for liking this, particularly if you're in a religious community, saying it's demonic to like horror films or whatever. Or, if you like violent video games, if you like blasting people's heads off with a shotgun, and people next to you might say that there's something wrong with you if you enjoy that. That book was specifically to say, actually, there's nothing wrong with you. It's a very normal and healthy part of culture to reflect on the things that scare us in ways that we can handle. And that's what we do with folklore, with horror movies, with video games. It's very, very normal.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was watching a video of yours recently, and you were talking about the kind of almost meteoric rise of Into the Fog, your YouTube channel. And you were and you were kind of going from the day you made that first video and then you uploaded it to where you are now, and how it's if anyone's been surprised by it, it's really been you at how quickly this has taken off.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty wild, really, and it's not like I wasn't aiming for it to grow because I don't know if you know for any creative who might be listening to this, like the dream and the goal is it's not even necessarily about riches and fame and all that. Maybe it is for some people, but it's the core goal is how can I at least make enough money from this so I can keep doing it without any sense of guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know that maybe I should be doing normal work, you know, should be doing a proper job, as it were. And to see, at least for the moment, the channel reach that sort of level where I can, with no guilt whatsoever, say, oh no, this is now my job. At least at the moment, is an amazing feeling.
Yeah, that is
And it's thanks
fantastic.
to people who listen. It's thanks to people who watch this stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Well, another place was really interesting because I suppose I didn't connect the dots until recently. A friend of mine suggested your YouTube channel. He's like, Kevin, you should check out this YouTube channel, Into the Fog. And I've watched some of your videos and stuff. Now, I've been listening to Uncanny for quite some time. And
Oh, yes.
and I've been re-listening to episodes of Uncanny while I go for walks and things. And then I was like, wait a second, I heard this name mentioned. Um, so you became connected with Danny Robbins in the Uncanny podcast. How did that
Yeah.
happen? Because that's, I mean, for those, I mean, maybe not everyone knows, but for people who love the spooky genre of podcasts, that's one of the biggest out there, if not the biggest out there.
If not the biggest, yeah. No, that was great to be in, to have been involved in that, and I've been in a few different seasons of that now, and just was also in the latest one, and also in the very first episode, which was cool. So this was like before anyone knew it was going to become so big that I was the first expert to be invited on. And that's not necessarily because I'm the word expert is kind of a strange word to because I do not feel like an expert in these things. I'm more of like a journalist in a way, finding the information and presenting it to other people, hopefully
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
balanced way. But I think that came about because I also write a monthly column for a magazine called the Fortean Times,
Oh,
which
okay,
is
yeah, of
a
course.
fairly well-known and well-respected journal on
Hmm.
the unexplained, and I've been writing for them for like 10 years,
Oh, wow,
particularly
okay.
as writing articles, but mainly as a kind of horror film reviewer and working for them then that way. And I think that Danny Robbins maybe heard about me through the Fortean Times or whatever, but he just called me and said, we're trying this thing out, and would you be willing to, be the voice of the paranormal openness side
Yeah.
for this episode? And I was like, yeah, let's give it a
Team
go.
believer.
Team believer, yeah, which was just fantastic. And then to see how that has grown and become so big and beloved is very satisfying to see. And
Yeah.
and a lot of it's a testament to the team who make that, and Danny particular, who's just a very kind of relatable, and it's the balance that this is the stuff that this is why I reacted with, yes, I'll be part of this with Uncanny, because there's balance.
Yeah.
Like if he'd said this is just, we're just going to go down the belief route,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, can't we have someone to say the opposite? And that's just the way my brain works, and I'm naturally like that, and that's what Into the Fog's like as well. So no, great thing to be a part of.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's fantastic. No, I mean, I think of my own podcast and things that people have asked me in the past, like, Kevin, do you believe all this stuff? I'm like, well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, a lot of the stories, for example, if we're talking about like Japanese yokai, a lot of these are
Hmm.
creatures that were created to teach morals and lessons to people every day,
Yeah,
like morals. I
yeah.
mean, the kappa, the green
Oh yeah.
water living creature that is said to pull people into the
Mm.
water and sometimes drown people or harm people. I mean, that was kind of a creature that was created in myth to warn people, don't go to the water by yourself, don't go to lakes, don't go swimming by
Yeah,
yourself, it's dangerous. I mean, that's kind of like
yeah.
a folk lesson. Water is dangerous, avoid it because you might drown.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where, when I'm talking about like the positive function of scary stories,
Hmm.
that's one of them, to be told, um, to your tribe or whatever, don't go out into the darkness at night because it could be dangerous,
Yeah.
doesn't mean a great deal. But if you're able to say, don't go out there because, the dark man is there, and he comes at this time of night, and he will eat every part of your body. You know,
Yeah.
people are like, oh crap, and you accentuate that myth to scare them into wisdom. And I think that's what horror does. Horror shocks us into wisdom. I talk about this in the Frighteners, how, you know, when we drive down a motorway and we see a crash, let's say, you know, the remnants of a car crash, and something within our brain says, look at that, and our, you know, our kind of heart, if you want to, you know, use the metaphor of the heart being the emotional part, the heart goes, why do you want to look at that, you sicko? You know, are you enjoying this? But the head is going, of course we're not enjoying this. We're interested in it because it's so novel, but we're also interested in it because I'm desperate to gather as much information as possible so that doesn't happen to me when I drive. And after we drive on, we slow down a little bit. We stop checking our phone while we're driving. You know, the horror of it all does shock us into some kind of wisdom. So I think there was a definite function in these stories. But for me, they're not necessarily just stories. I think too many people have seen, including myself in certain ways, things that slither beyond the rational, that I think, yes, of course we have folklore, but I do think there's something weird going on in the world as well, which I find really tantalizing. I don't think I'd be into this subject if I knew for a fact it was just folklore.
Yeah.
That kind of, it doesn't really
No,
float my boat.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I'm the kind of person where I can't quite say that I've had any specific drastic kind of life-changing scary moments. I've had a few things. I had a previous podcast where I told a story about having, you know, like very strange dreams where something kind of came true afterwards a few days later. And I was
Oh,
kind of
okay.
like, well, that was unexpected. I've been in a few places where I've had strange feelings and all, but nothing really clear cut. But how shall I say? I'm open-minded. And part of me, you know, says I would like to have a scary experience, but maybe I shouldn't say that because who knows, maybe
Well, yeah, there is a tipping point where, you know, a lot of people really do want to have them, and then when they have them,
they wish
it
they
opens
hadn't.
up a whole world of. I mean, a lot of people, like, you know, will say, "I'm glad that happened because it's given me hope in the face of death," or so, you know, like,
Yeah.
now I know there's nothing. There's something. Sorry, after
Yeah.
death. But other people, I mean, if you just think about it, you know, if you have not seen anything that you really can't explain, there is a safety in that, and
Yeah,
a welcome safety. But literally, like, if tonight, if you wake up and you see a small figure dancing on a table next to your bed, and you know you're not dreaming, you know, let's say
Yeah.
you get up, you wash your face, you turn around, and he's walking into the into the bathroom behind you, tugging on your pajama bottoms. You're like, what the hell? And it doesn't just bring the fear of it. It brings an entire extra, am I going insane? Can I tell anyone about this? If I tell anyone, are they going to think I'm lying or stupid?
Yeah.
It flings you into a whole new world. And that's why in a recent episode, I found myself saying, you may have, I think I used the phrase, you may have the privilege of non-belief. You don't realize that is, in some ways, it could be a privilege because you just haven't experienced that yet. But once you experience something, it's like the option is taken away from you. And that's not always a welcome thing. So that's why I think it's important to have empathy for people who make these claims rather than just an instant shutdown.
Yeah.
Well, it's obvious you're making that up because you want money.
Yeah.
Which there's not a lot of money for witnesses to make,
and especially
stuff.
like you said, if when you have people who are like, here's my story, please don't tell anyone. You know, now I'm not
Yeah.
my Supernatural Japan podcast isn't quite at the level where you are right now, but I do get correspondence from people from time to time, and I've had people even
Great.
send me videos and message me and say, hey, like, this one person I know who's had a pretty big social media presence, who it was based in Japan, was like, he sent me some videos privately and he told me a story like this weird stuff happened in this house I owned, and
Yeah.
it's really weird. And he said, like, don't tell, I'm just telling you about this, but look. And he sent me
Mm,
some videos of things he filmed around the house, and it was just kind of like, wow, that's
yeah.
fascinating. um
Hmm.
Now, Japan. You have shared some
Yeah.
stories about Japan in the past, and one thing I would love for you to do this evening, this morning, whenever people are listening to this episode, would
Mm,
be to share a story based in Japan, a spooky story, because you've told a few
sure.
doozies, and yeah, and I'll sit back and enjoy this just like the listeners.
Sure. Well, I mean, the one that comes to mind is a fairly kind of subtle incident, but it is eerie, and it did kind of
Okay.
it really got under my skin as I talked to the witness about it. But it happened in a two-story house on the fringes of Kyoto. It's around 2015 when it occurred, and basically this guy, this witness, and his fiance they were traveling across Japan and had three friends with them, and they were doing this big road trip across Japan. They were real like Japanophiles, they loved the culture, the manga, the history, the food, just all of it. They loved that stuff. So anyway, they were traveling around. I think they were started in Hokkaido and then worked their way down and to the southern cities. And anyway, eventually ended up in Kyoto, and they needed somewhere to stay, and they decided to book a rental home for a few nights. And as you do, you go online and you try and find somewhere decent. And they found a pretty charming traditional apartment. The whole, I think, is it tatami floor mats and
Yeah.
futons and all that, all the
Hmm.
classic stuff. And they're
Yeah.
like, this is it. We should live there. Let's not live in a let's not stay in a just a hotel like that looks like everywhere else. Let's actually live like the locals. And so they saw these pictures and thought, let's book into this apartment. It was I think that, yes, it was in the, it's like slum area of Kyoto, but they didn't necessarily realize that at the time. They weren't fully familiar with the kind of layout of the place. Anyway, so they turned up at this place, excited to get a slice of traditional Japan, but it was too traditional, or rather, I should say, too old. That's the better word to use. It was too old and left to its own devices because the
Okay.
place was in an absolute state of decay.
Mhm.
The bathroom tiles were all smashed. They were like hanging off somewhere on the floor. There was literal mold creeping up on the walls. There was a smell of like dampness in the air. It was just a horrible, horrible place. And now they were like, now we know why this was so cheap. And it felt, they got the impression like no one, either no one's been here for years and it's been abandoned, or whoever has been here has absolutely zero interest in looking after it, and also quite willing to put pictures on a website that do not reflect the reality of this house. But I don't know about you, but I am a little bit like this in that I have a tendency to, like, if things change in front of me, if something, I'm planning on doing one thing and it becomes something else, I'm not the type of person who is like, oh well, screw that, let's go, no way I'm staying here. I will think, hey, we didn't spend that much money, maybe it'll be kind of a fun experience to stay in
Yeah.
this really skanky place,
Let's rough it. Let's rough it.
let's
Yeah.
rough it. Yeah, let's rough it. And you start thinking of like games you've played, like Silent Hill and Resident Evil and stuff. Hey, let's have like an experience of that. And this is what these friends did. Five of them. They started just laughing off the dirt and joking about the horror movie vibe, and
Yeah.
said, actually, let's stick around. So they did. They decided to stay. But as they did that, and they unpacked their stuff and started settling down, they knew something wasn't right. Something kind of felt off, like like you just get a vibe of a place that is intense and feels like it's beyond just a feeling. Well, they started to feel that, a sense of darkness. Was that just in their mind? Maybe, but it was strange. It was really unusually cold. For example, they said that it was freezing in some of the rooms, which actually is a little bit odd. As far as I know, it was September it happened, and I don't know a great deal about the weather systems of Kyoto,
It would
but
be
I
pretty
looked
hot.
into.
September would be quite hot.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and
It's a hot
I'm
time.
glad you confirmed that.
Oh
Yeah, so I
yeah,
looked at it
it's
and I'm like,
actually
wait,
very, very hot time of year. Very hot.
yeah. So it's humid and hot there,
Hmm.
and yet they were um, up until this point they were like they had a zipper hoodies and stuff that were carrying them over their sling bags because it was just way too hot to wear this stuff. But once they were in the place, I'm like, crap, I'm gonna have to put this stuff on. So there was
Mm.
something kind of weird about it, and they put their cooling sprays and things to one side while they were in that house.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, they, I think I can't remember if they contacted the landlady. No, actually, they couldn't. That's all right. They couldn't contact the landlady because there'd been no one there to greet them. It's like an Airbnb where
Yeah.
there's a key inside a letterbox that they could get in. So, anyway, so they're in this cold place. It's giving them like really the creeps, and there was this sort of stillness about the place. And they went upstairs to the sleeping quarters, and they were accessed by a very, very steep, almost kind of vertical staircase, the type of staircase that makes you feel a little bit woozy going
Hmm.
up and down it. And they climbed this kind of edgy staircase and started to look through the bedrooms. And that's when they went into this one room, and it was a typical futon bedroom. It had a large balcony, and there was this windowsill. And on the windowsill, he saw this line of dolls,
Mm.
Kokeshi dolls. And these are like, those classic kind of wooden kind cylindrical type bodies, little happy painted faces. And but he also saw some other ones, which I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. Ichimash two or something. Ishimash,
I'm
a,
not
a
sure.
certain
Yeah.
type of doll.
Okay.
He
Yeah.
described it. I think it might be Ishimash two. Or I'm not pronouncing it right. I just can't quite remember. But these were ones that these dolls were more lifelike. They had
Okay.
glass eyes. The kimonos they were wearing were made of fabric. It wasn't just painted on. And these realistic dolls were at the center of all the others, and they had these like pale, solemn faces. But anyway, all of these dolls were facing inward into the room, as you would. You put your dolls up if you've got them, and put your Funkos or whatever you've got. You're not gonna make them face away. You're gonna
Yeah.
make them
Yeah.
face into the room. That's what they're
Of
for.
course. Yeah.
And he said to the others, he said, "Look, if I'm going to sleep in this room, because it looked like this was going to be the room he'd sleep in," he says, I'm not having those look at me while I'm sleeping. That's too creepy. I don't want them to have their eyes on me. So he decided to turn them all around, and he did this carefully. So he did them all around, turned each one around so they were facing the window. Someone else could deal with their scary faces now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he thought, that's great. And he left the room. He was the last person to leave the room, and he closed the door behind him. But anyway, they went around the rest of the place, and they started to feel a bit of tension amongst the group because, none of them really wanted to spend the night there. The more they started to think about it, they were like, actually, we've been stupid. This is not going to be slumming it. This is actually going to be horrible. Like it could be dangerous in here. Like all this mold. We don't know what part of Kyoto we're in. Like this is dodgy. So they decided, actually, forget it. We are going to leave. We're going to get our money back for this place. Let's go to a hotel, a generic hotel. That's better.
Okay. Yeah.
And so they started taking photographs of the damage of the place to inform the landlady so they could get their money back. And they packed their bags and they prepared to kind of meet downstairs in the van that they were doing this road trip in. And just as Bernard was about to go, he noticed his hoodie. I mentioned it earlier. He draped it over
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
sling bag
For his
because it was
bag,
just
yeah.
too hot. But it gotten hot in there. But at that point, he had it still on his bag, and it fallen off. It went, oh, I've dropped it somewhere on our little tour of the house, and so he figured it must be somewhere up there. So he didn't want to go back into that room upstairs, but he thought, well, it'll only take me a minute. So he went up this steep staircase while the others are prepping this van, and he started checking around for his stuff, and he found himself at the door where the dolls were, and he thought, they're just dolls, chill out. And he walked in, and straight away he saw his hoodie. But when he had left, remember, this was draped over his sling bag. So he just figured, well, it must have slipped off. It would be lying in a pile on the floor. But it wasn't on a heap on the floor. What didn't make sense was that his hoodie was now folded neatly. And it was sitting up on the windowsill. And it was right in front of the dolls. And that in itself was eerie enough. But this caused him, obviously, to look at the dolls. And all of the dolls had turned back around. And they were now facing into the room again, and they were looking right at him. And Bernard said, in this moment, he was there was no doubt in his mind. He knew he was the last person to leave, and he also knew that nobody, and he was really serious about it. Nobody had gone back into that room since he had left. But these sorts of subtle moments can kind of plunge you into a sense of confusion, no, never mind, fear.
Yeah.
And anyway, so as he's there, he also realized, he saw it, it was there. He had a DS, the old Nintendo DS.
Oh, yeah.
He had one of those with him, the old handheld gaming device. And he normally kept that in a carry case, to protect it from drops and stuff.
Yeah.
But his case was also sitting neatly on top of the folded hoodie. And he was like, wait a minute, so even if my hoodie had fell off, in some weird physics way, could it land in a folded way? I mean,
yeah.
Let's be honest, no. But let's be open to the rational, maybe, but that seems very unlikely. But what he found impossible to explain was the DS. How did the case get out? Because he kept that inside his sling bag, and he remembered he would always shut that tightly so that the DS would never fall out. And yet there it was sitting on amongst these staring dolls that had turned round, that had moved, it seems, independently. And as this all started to sink in, he just felt this prickling sensation, and he just raced out of the room. And he didn't see anything more unusual necessarily, but he said that as he was going out, he got this sort of tunnel vision. He almost slipped down the staircase when he was going, and he left. It was later that they discovered that this apartment was in an area where I think there's they call the Burakumin.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's the right word. But it's basically, it was the part of the town where there's industries connected with death. Grave diggers, executioners, people who worked in
butchers, all those people. Yeah.
Slaughterhouses. Yeah. And because there's
they were
sort of fear
the untouchables. They were the untouchables in Japan.
That's right.
And even today in 2026, a lot of people don't like to talk about that past. It's still it's a great way to make people feel really uncomfortable if you bring that up, that topic.
That's right, and you put them all into one part of town, so that they're all together, and there's a sort of a prejudice against these people, even though they're doing jobs that are essential to a society. And anyway, you discovered that this is where these things were going on, and this was one of those stories that, I think like a lot of real life paranormal stories, they kind of don't have much of an ending. If this had been made up, he might have said, and then I got back home to Britain, and I saw the doll sitting. The doll was
on my dresser. And,
exactly. Yeah. All that sort of stuff. And a lot of these paranormal experiences, they just kind of fizzle out. But what the witness is left with, and I think this is what hopefully viewers of Into the Fog and perhaps listeners to your podcast will hopefully grasp, is that what do you do if you have that experience? It's subtle enough to maybe have a rational explanation, but let's assume, I guess the only other explanation is someone in there was playing a trick on him. But he was like, people are 100% convinced he was the last person there. And what do you do with that? Because it was folded, the dolls moved, and the DS had come out of his bag and be put on there. And these are the types of experiences that some people have very dramatic ones. And on my channel, I explore some extremely dramatic ones, which are a bit more Hollywood, I suppose. But many of them kind of fizzle out, but the witness is left with something that is both eerie, I think, and just nickels them for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, stories like that kind of entice me even more because there is something again
Mm,
that subtlety. I mean, if I was that
yeah,
man, I probably would have been just confused, maybe a little freaked out. But I think it would have been
yeah,
afterwards once we got into that van and we drove away and I got to the hotel room and I'm like laying in bed that night and I'm
yeah,
thinking about it, running it through my mind. That's when it probably really would start to bother me. And I'd be like, wait a
yeah.
second. And that's, I think the more I could let it stew in my
Mhm.
mind, it would really truly freak me out then.
Yes, and there's something particular about when a paranormal thing happens to you while you're in a group,
Mm,
um, because you're leaving that place and you're going, why was it my hoodie? Why was it my DS? Um, we had five other people with it, or a group of other people with us. Why was it me? And I
mm.
used to, when I was a teenager, me and my friends used to play the Ouija board. I used the Ouija board a lot. I made a Ouija board in woodwork once at school
Oh, really? Okay.
as a project. As a project, and whether the Ouija board is real or idiomotor effect, people pushing it, subconsciously, I don't know. But when you're in a group of like a massive group, a big party,
Hmm.
and it's going around, and then it starts like, who and anybody there? Yes. Who do you want to speak to? P-E-T, and it's my name coming out. There's something about the targeting of the other world on you that that takes the story beyond just that was a spooky experience. Like, it's just, why did I get the attention of
Mm.
those dolls and not somebody else?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why even the subtle stories of the paranormal have a habit of kind of wriggling in there.
Yeah,
Like,
like
I
what?
suppose, like Junji Ito, the book I'm reading, when there's a bit where they discover that one of these hairs that's in Tomi's body, one of the big character in the book, there's a hair that is growing in their brain, in a brain, and it's moving around and kind of, they don't know how the hair got in there. They see it in an MRI scan, and it's just tiny and it's thin and it's tangled up, and that's kind of what these experiences can do. This
Mm.
subtle thread in your
Yeah.
heart and your brain.
You're like, why me? What is it about
Why you?
me, not the other people? Um, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing. I want to ask you
Hmm,
about your books. I mean, you're an author as well. You've already
sure.
mentioned one. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about the different the writing you've done?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, obviously, if you're listening, you might not see these, but we're doing a little bit of video too. So
Yeah,
just
yeah,
in
yeah.
case, yeah, this is. I'll just show some of the, but I'll
And I will
describe
put
them.
this
This
up
is
on
my.
I will put this up on my YouTube channel, and I will put
All
links
right,
so
cool,
the
cool.
listeners can go and check this out and see it.
So this is the book, The Frighteners, which again is Why We Love Monsters, Ghosts, Death, and Gore, which took me to Transylvania and Rome and all across
Oh,
Britain,
wow.
trying to understand and having crazy adventures, just trying to understand why I like scary things. And
Mm.
it came out in America as well, and also Taiwan. So I have the cool
Oh,
Taiwanese edition there,
oh, that's cool.
um, which is pretty hard to find, I think, these days. But anyway, that's there. But no, the other books I did were novels, and these novels are the same character. It's a guy called Matt Hunter who used to be a church minister and then became an atheist professor. Something very bad happens in the
Okay.
first book where puts him off, but he spends his time helping the police track down um, evangelical Christian serial killers
Oh, wow.
or weird cults, and it's a book that explores religion and the supernatural, but through a kind of murder mystery type book. And
Okay.
yeah, they were a lot of fun to write. But trying to make a living from being an author is, let's just say, it's a challenge, which is why YouTube has been a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the thing too. Imagine that if I mean I think people would probably find it more likely if you said, "Well, what do you do for a living?" "Well, I'm a writer," as opposed to "I'm a YouTuber." But there you are.
Yeah, and that's the irony with YouTube. Like, like when you say YouTuber, it sounds like, oh, so you just kind of stand in front of a camera and like waffle about stuff. But there's so much writing involved, like
Mm.
from like the research and the writing. And because particularly with Into the Fog, we go into such depth. And now, like, I've got an assistant to help me with the channel, and also like this historian that sometimes comes in and helps me
Mm.
to really dig into things. And so there's a great deal of writing and effort involved with YouTube, but you don't necessarily
Yeah. Yeah.
realize that. But yeah,
Well, I mean, I've got a couple of friends who do well on YouTube, and they have a team as well. I mean, it
yeah.
got to a point where they needed a camera person, they needed an editor, they needed people sometimes
Mm,
even to help with their social media and different aspects like that, where there's just not enough hours in the day to do all those things.
absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to have all of those. But at the moment, yeah, I do have someone who kind of helps me out with research and admin and some art stuff as well. But up until maybe 6 or 7 months ago, I was doing everything myself, and I was putting out episodes every week rather than every 2 weeks. I don't know how I was managing to do absolutely everything from writing to editing to research to artwork to the admin.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So for those amazing listeners out there who are enjoying this episode, where can they find all the different things you do online?
well, you can visit peterlaws.co.uk, which or just Google Peter Laws, and
Mhm.
you'll find my stuff. Whether it's to do with books or podcasts and YouTube. But if you go on YouTube, you either type my name, Peter Laws, or Into the Fog, and normally that will come up. And that's a channel that has, I'm putting out like episodes every 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
some of them can be quite lengthy. Like the one I've got coming out on Saturday is feature length. It's like an hour and 40 minutes. So
Oh,
that's been
wow.
really hardcore. We've worked so hard on that episode. So sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're a bit shorter, but tend to be pretty substantial. And also, I did used to do a podcast called Creepy Cove Community Church, which was something I did like in lockdown, which was a weird project where I realized that a lot of people out there were feeling a bit disconnected and
Yeah.
lonely. But I was noticing that all of my friends who were in religious communities or Christian communities, they were having on a kind of an instant group of people who would get together each week on Zoom or whatever and
Yeah.
have time together, and not everyone had access to that sort of stuff. So I thought, hey, why don't I invent a church that is not based on on a real place but is fictional, and everyone knows it. And so I created this thing called Creepy Cove Community Church, which was a full church services with hymns and meditations and prayers and a sermon, but geared at people who are not religious, so not pushing anything. But this church was set in a town where all horror movies really happened,
Okay.
and so everyone in the church was like, Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th was like, did the Keep Fit on a Thursday. We did a nativity play where Jack Torrance from The Shining was like played King Herod or something. It was just absolutely nuts. And each week there would be like a brand new, I'd have like write a song and record a song that was like this horror hymn. And yeah, I've kept those up there for people because the talk bit, the sermon, was about like well-being and encouraging and definitely not pushing any religion, and just trying to encourage people that they're not alone, and that they're good people despite what they might think about themselves. And so that sort of stuff's still up there, creepycove.com.
Okay, wow. I did not know about creepycove.com. Cool,
Yeah,
cool,
yeah,
cool.
that's pretty wild.
Nice,
It was
nice.
so niche though. I thought maybe I might be able to make that into something that could be sustainable, but that is such a niche thing to have a fake church service set in a horror town. So yeah. Oh, and one more thing. Sorry, I forgot to mention my Patreon. I have a Patreon,
Hmm.
patreon.com/peterlaws, and people can get extra stuff and support the things that I do. And that's it. That's a cool community there too.
Cool, awesome. I will share all of these links.
Thank you.
Before I let you go, because you've got to work on a video. Do you have any plans to visit Japan in the near future, or not so near future?
Not in the near future, but I would love to do that. I mean, that would be a great experience for me. I think I'm so kind of I almost feel like I've been there because of the amount of like films and particularly video games that I've played.
Yeah.
And I do remember one time I was at a dinner party and people were asked, this was when I was like 20 or something, and people, or 25 or something, people are asking me, oh, what jobs have you had in your life? And everyone's going, oh, I used to be a post, throw the newspapers over the thing, a delivery boy. I used to be this, I used to be that. And I was listing the stuff I did. And at one point I find myself saying, oh, I used to drive a forklift truck in, and I'm like, wait a minute. No, I didn't. That was the game Shenmue,
Oh,
where where in Shenmue, I remember on the Sega Dreamcast, it forced you, like if you had a fight with some character at like 7 o'clock at night, you couldn't just fast track to that. You had to go out and like have a job in the daytime, and you had to like pass the time. And so I remember for like ages delivering stuff by a forklift truck and walking around the streets of, I guess, was it Japan? I think it was in that game. So yes, I'd love to visit because I almost feel like I've already been there, but of course I
nice.
haven't. So yeah, that would be an amazing experience.
Nice. Fantastic. Well, Peter, thank you so much for coming on Supernatural Japan. I absolutely
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.